Hi everyone. This is the recording for Monday's class. Um, that again, well, I couldn't be there, so I'm recording it for you. And I decided that this should be the one about bears because it fits nicely into the time that we have for um, for a single class. So the whole topic of bears is included in here. And what we're talking about when we talk about bears is the black bear, Ursus americanus. In Mexico, there's actually been two large predators that have been fully extirpated, meaning that they have been removed from their natural environment. They are locally extinct, and that is the Mexican gray wolf and grizzly bears. There used to be grizzly bears in Mexico, but there are no more. Um, Now, black bears are still present in Mexico, but they are put at risk by human actions. Among them, like with the other two species that I just mentioned, there has been government-sponsored campaigns to eradicate them, to eradicate wolves and coyotes, and in the process, they also extirpated black bears over large areas where they used to inhabit. So as a result of these actions by people, there is currently only a few remnant populations of black bears that remain. And this is all thanks to legal protections that were established in 1970. So part of the reason that bears are hunted is the same reason that gray wolves and that Mexican gray wolves and grizzly bears were hunted, and it's that they are considered cattle predators. So they interfere with the profit that cattle ranchers can get, and therefore, and this is not entirely unjustified because they are a predatory animal. So it is still a risk factor today. So there's a number of habitat changes that can also affect bears, right? Like with most species, changes in the habitat as a result of human activity are one of the central reasons that their original populations have decreased. And this includes habitat fragmentation, urban development, farmland expansion, and construction of communication infrastructure. So, for example, highways and railroads fragment the habitat of black bears and other organisms, and if they can't cross, then effectively you have a big population divided into two or into further smaller pieces. That's what we mean with the effects of communication infrastructure. At this time, currently, black bears occupy 20% of their original distribution in Mexico. And you can see it in the map here. The shaded area in gray is showing the historic distribution of black bears, and then the current distribution is shown in diagonal lines. But this is sort of a big scale summary of where you might be able to find them. In reality, within those areas, it is just smaller patches of habitat that remain viable for black bears. The remnant populations that still exist persist in the Sierra Madre Oriental and Occidental. So areas that are somewhat less accessible to humans and civilization are more likely to preserve black bears. Originally, black bears were present in 12 states, and currently they persist in 9 states. The truth is that it is not all bad news. In recent years, since the last 20 years, populations have been increasing. And in part, this would explain the constant news that we get about human wildlife conflicts with bears or people encountering bears, especially in places like in Sinaloa and Nuevo León. In most of Mexico, black bears are considered an endangered species by Semarnat. So normally, we just say a species is fully endangered or not endangered, and there's no divisions, subdivisions. But for black bears specifically, there is a region in Coahuila called the Sierra del Burro, which is considered where black bears are considered subject to special protection. If you remember, subject to special protection is a category in NAM 059 that is the lowest protected category. And that is because in that region, black bears exist in stable populations. According to IUCN, black bears are least concerned species. But again, we need to remember that IUCN takes into account the total distribution of the species in the world. So, of course, they would be least concerned because there's stable populations in other countries too. But the issue really is that we're more concerned about is what's happening in Mexico. Part of this recent increase in the populations of black bears, and also the fact that they have survived in some areas in Coahuila, is thanks to the efforts by ranchers, by UMA managers, and by even mining operations who have helped the recovery of populations in Coahuila. And I have a video that I normally show here. I won't be able to include it in this recording. I will share it with you guys either when we meet in class, or I'll just share the link with you. But it is of a black bear getting really close to people in Coahuila. In fact, it's that picture that you see here. It's the black bear got into the back of a truck. So again, in order for black bear populations to be so successful in Coahuila, there was also direct government action. The state of Coahuila declared the black bear as their symbol for natural resource conservation in 1999. And you can see it here. They even said that they celebrated the World Day for the Protection of Bears, which is February 21st. And you can see this is from the government of the state of Coahuila. Populations have also recovered in mountainous parts of Nuevo León, San Luis Potosí, Querétaro, Guanajuato, and Tamaulipas. And some slower recovery has also occurred in the Sierra Madre Occidental, especially in remote regions. This recovery has awakened public interest, and state and federal agencies have been encouraged to develop management strategies. And we can even go further and say mitigation strategies, in the sense that if you have populations of bears, the likelihood of people encountering bears or bears encountering people increases. And so you need to have an education strategy so that people can know what to do to avoid risks of those encounters, and also so that people won't take matters into their own hands and harm the bears, as sometimes happens, like that recent case of the bear cub that was shot in the lower part of its body. So, more generally, let's talk about the species. Black bears live in typically forested areas. It can be either temperate or tropical forests. So temperate forests is like pine, oak forests, or just pine forests, that kind of thing. And tropical forests, more, the tropical vegetation like we have in the southern part of the country. But they can easily adapt to human-dominated landscapes. Um, they can also be found in transitional areas to arid environments. So, for example, coming down from the mountains from a forested area where it meets like an arid habitat that is like chaparral or close to the desert, they can also be found in those areas because they're in the transition zone. Um, Black bears are one of the largest carnivores. By carnivores, we mean mammals in the order Carnivora, right? Not just describing their diet, but Carnivora is the order that includes all cats, or all felines essentially, all canids, and also bears, and a few other families of mammals. So one of the largest carnivores in Mexico. They measure between 150 and 210 centimeters in length, and adult males weigh between 60 and 225 kilograms. So you can see there can be quite a bit of variation. Females are typically smaller, weighing between 40 and 80 kilograms. However, these are numbers based on the ranges that have been observed worldwide. In Mexico, they are typically smaller, rarely exceeding 130 kilograms, which, I mean, it's still pretty big. Now, how we distinguish them between males and females is a series of observable characteristics. For one, adult males can be sometimes distinguished by the fact that they are larger than females, more robust, and they frequently have scars on their fur or their face, which are the result of fighting between pairs. So males will fight one another and they end up getting these scars, and that is a sign that a bear might be a male. Females cannot be distinguished from adolescent males unless cubs are present, or if sex organs are visible, because females are simply smaller. Now, in these images, you can see the coloration of two black bears, and I know that the name implies that they are black, right? But in fact, the coat may vary. There's actually black bears that are brown in their coat, in their fur. Also some that are gray or cinnamon in color. And this variation has a geographic component. Depending where you are, you might see that the prevalent color might be brown or gray or black and so on. As far as their diet, black bears are omnivores. Plant tissue makes up between 70 and 90% of their diet, which is a lot, right? They're not eating meat all the time. At high elevations, they will eat things like acorns, berries, and other wild fruits, like the bear in the top image here, eating berries. And at lower elevations, they will also eat the soft tissues of yuccas, prickly pears, and sotol, Dasydidion, and other plants. Sotol, I don't know if you've seen it. It's a relatively common plant from arid environments that is also used to make an alcoholic beverage, kind of like tequila is, but sotol is much smaller, and the leaves are flat and very numerous, but kind of similar to maybe an agave in that way. But yeah, they will also eat the soft parts of such plants. And when they do act as predators, their prey includes white-tailed deer, mule deer, collared peccary, and they can even sometimes eat domestic mammals, as well as consuming insects and miscellaneous carrion. Carrion meaning the dead animals. They're not specifically picky, so that they can even include things like insects and carrion in their diet. So So, if you know one thing about bears, it might be that they hibernate. And black bears have an interesting pattern of hibernation. Um, how hibernation happens actually depends on the habitat where they are found. All bears may hibernate in high altitude mountain habitats where there is little food during the winter, which kind of makes sense, right? They need to preserve that energy and survive the winter by staying in hibernation. But at lower elevations where there is more food most of the year, hibernation is mostly only done by pregnant females, and it can actually be delayed until December or January. So they can be a good part of the fall and winter still active because there's still food around. There's even some areas where bear encounters may happen year round, again because it's only the pregnant females that are hibernating. So it's not like you can say, especially in Mexico, that you can. Sorry about that. You can't say in Mexico that it's winter and therefore we're not going to encounter any bears. Well, that's not exactly a safe assumption. And here you can see on top a bear hibernating and then a mother with its cub. I guess hibernating or getting ready for hibernation. And another thing that you probably know about hibernation is that before hibernation, bears will consume large amounts of food to store the energy that allows them to survive the winter. A little bit about bear behavior. Bears are solitary most of the time. Right? They don't form packs or groups for hunting. They mostly go on their own. Of course, during the mating season, they come together. They associate in pairs or into small groups, usually as one female plus one or more males. Males will establish dominance by behavioral displays and occasionally bouts of combat. And that's where those scars that we were talking about earlier come from. Bears will actually fight each other to establish a dominant hierarchy and access to the female. And so the top image here is showing two bears engaging in combat. Bears also aggregate at high concentrations of food, such as fruits or nuts. So it's like, this of course brings to mind that scene from Brother Bear, right, where all the bears aggregate for salmon. Of course, those are grizzly bears, but it's the same idea. If you have a location where suddenly there's a lot of food, it could be fruit or nuts, mainly in Mexico, not really salmon, what you end up having is bears coming together at the same time into that location. And bears are actually territorial animals, that they will defend a territory, and they mark it by biting, clawing, or rubbing against trees and other wood structures. Right, so the claw marks or the bite marks are a signal that they're leaving to other animals of their presence, saying this place is taken, and also by rubbing themselves against trees and other wood structures, they rub off their scent, also as a signal, a chemical signal to other bears in the area. Now, the life history of bears is that the cubs remain with their mother until they reach almost 1.5 years. So it's relatively common to see the mother with her cubs, and typically they have 1 to 3 cubs per litter, like you see in this image, right? So with 3 little cubs. Then when the cubs become independent, females get home ranges near their mothers, and the males disperse long distances when they become independent. which is kind of a relatively common pattern in that males are the ones in many animals that end up dispersing longer distances while females stay nearby their mothers. So then we can talk a little bit about the population management of black bears. Black bears require large areas of contiguous habitat in order to ensure their minimum population size. This is an important concept, by the way, that we haven't brought forward before, but it's a good time to do this. The minimum population size is the smallest population size necessary to maintain genetic diversity and avoid inbreeding. So depending on the species, you're going to have a different number that is the minimum population size. For black bears specifically, the estimate is that you need at least 50 to 100 adult bears in order to maintain genetic diversity. If you fall below that, then you start to have problems with inbreeding. And then the likelihood of the population surviving in the long run is lower. Now, black bears, as we said, are quite capable of surviving in areas where humans are present or areas that have been modified by humans. And so we can talk a little bit about that. Sports hunting of bears is prohibited in Mexico. They're actually this determination by Semarnat is based on they give them a protective legal status based on the information that they have about the current status of the population, but the reality is that we don't know all that much about how big populations currently are. So it's like being safe. They decided that sports hunting is not allowed. Again, that Sierra del Burro in northern Coahuila might be the one place where there might be enough bears and also suitable habitat to allow for controlled exploitation, meaning that there could be sports hunting in that area, even though currently there is not. One thing that has helped black bear populations in northern Mexico has been that people will put out water sources in order to have water for their cattle, or they might do both water and food for white-tailed deer, and bears can find those resources and also use them, and so that increases their likelihood of survival, and their populations as a result of that end up growing. This image right here is camera trap image of this small group of bears, which looks to be like three, or a mother with 3 cubs, and this is from Campo Verde in Chihuahua. So this is one of the really neat images that can be obtained with camera traps. Ranches that have incorporated wildlife management for sports hunting are suitable habitat for bears, right? So yeah, if you have an UMA and you have set it up for hunting, then in many places it's possible that you could also have a bear population. However, they are still a considerable cattle predator. So it's true that they can feed on cattle, and that is an issue that is of concern to anyone that is setting up an operation, either as keeping cattle or having those mixed models that we talked about, where you have both cattle and wildlife. Sport hunting and ecotourism ventures could compensate the cattle losses and provide economic incentives in the future. If you advertise it as people can come and see the bears as part of their ecotouristic experience, that might actually be a good source of money, right, of revenue, and that might offset any costs that having the bears has, especially in the form of them going after cattle. Um, Also, another thing that affects bears, as we said, is the transformation or the modification of the habitat, right? And one of the ways this happens is by cutting down wood or forests for wood production. But the specific mode in which it is done could be adapted to allow for bear survival. You know, instead of stripping or removing entire strips of forest, you can cut trees in between to allow sufficient density to still have bears in an area. That's basically the idea. And then finally, just for the sake of completeness, I found this image giving a little bit of information about what to do if you encounter a bear, and how to distinguish between grizzlies and brown bears. So for one thing, I meant black bears. For one thing, black bears have taller ears, they don't have a hump on their shoulders, and they are generally smaller. Um, in in the case of, if you're in a place with grizzlies, you have to be very careful. You need to carry bear spray, and uh, it's recommended that you, when you're in an area where you might be at risk, you should be loud to scare them away or prevent them from approaching. You also have to be very careful with food. You know, in areas where there's high density of bears, especially the grizzlies, you need to tie up your food and put it up a tree, or there's a special canisters that are bear proof, and usually keep it away from your campsite. Try not to wear any scents like soaps or colognes that have a smell. All of these are things, you know, it is really serious, because people in the US especially, I'm aware of them being cases every year of people being attacked by bears. If encountering a grizzly, walk away slowly, don't run, get your bear spray, be prepared to spray, but sort of get away slowly. If possible, if you're charged, roll into a ball. I think that's kind of what Leonardo DiCaprio did in that movie, right? In any case, with black bears, you actually try to make yourself look bigger. You stand your ground, you try to be big and be noisy so that you deter the attack by the bear. That way, they might retreat. They might decide that you're not worth the effort. If you're charged by a bear, fight back. By a black bear, fight back. Aim especially for the nose or other sensitive area. You can use rocks and sticks, and the bear should be the one that retreats first. So, anyways, you can read it on your own also. But I think this was interesting information. As you see, I put it in white background because it's not something you need to memorize for the exam or anything. But it's something good to know. And I think that's it, because next we will continue with pigeons and doves. Of course, and I'll try to do a little review of some of this, see if there are any questions. But for now, I'll leave it at that, and I'll see you, I guess very soon. Bye.